The power of words. Changing a few words on the piece of card in front of that blind man changed his day, changed what people were able to and prepared to give him. Words are powerful, and the way we use them is important. We need to use them wisely. And the book of Proverbs has a lot to say about words, their use wise and foolish, and the consequences of doing that as well. The problem is that the words in Proverbs are scattered around numerous chapters. You may almost read any chapter from about chapter 12 onwards, and you'll find some reference to the wise use of words. But this morning I just want to concentrate really on those words that Cheryl read to us, words from chapter 12 of the book of Proverbs, with perhaps a slight meander into one or two other chapters and a quick tour down to the New Testament and to what James has to say about words. So where do we start? Well, let's start by changing that. Let's start by looking at some of the Proverbs in chapter 12. Proverbs which tell us something of the power of words to bring peace and happiness and joy into our life and into the world. Now, perhaps I should add a word of warning just here at the beginning. I'm not advocating that we all should become instantaneously amateur psychologists. There are others much better equipped here in church to do that than I am. What I'm suggesting is that some of these proverbs that we read in the book of Proverbs about words, these are the things that should become natural to us in our lives. And we use in our everyday conversation, in our family, in our home, with friends, at work, wherever we are conversing with people. I think that these proverbs teach us how to use words wisely, guided by God. So we start with this particular proverb: the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. And when I was a boy, and I used to complain to my mother that my sister had just called me names, had just spoilt the game I was playing with, etc., etc., she used to say to me, "Sticks and stones can hurt your bones, but words can never hurt you." Well, in a sense, that's right. Physically, words, I don't think, are able to help, are able to hurt us. But we all know, don't we, as we grow up, that words really do have the power to hurt us. They really get down inside us, and they tend to make us cross and angry and want to reply quickly and perhaps thoughtlessly. But the proverb that we read here says that the tongue of the wicked, the tongue of the wise, can bring healing. That's not physical healing. You can't talk a broken bone into being repaired. Well, at least I don't think you can talk a broken bone into being repaired. But you can, perhaps just with a word here and there, it occurs in a conversation with someone that you're speaking to. A wise word, a word that comes because you have God's wisdom within your life, can bring help and help in the healing process for those who have been hurt by words. If we turn, wrong way. If we turn on a bit in the book of Proverbs in chapter 12, we read this in verse 25. Anxiety weighs down on the heart, but a kind word cheers up. And we all know, I'm sure, of meeting people with a very long face who really do need some cheering up. And what the proverb is saying, that just a cheerful word is sometimes just so helpful and encouraging to people. A kind word that will cheer them up. Much better the kind word than a word of criticism or a word of discouragement to someone who is feeling anxious about something. And then another example of the wise use of words. Just back a few verses in verse 20. Deceit is in the heart of those who plot evil, but those who promote peace have joy. In our conversations with people, in our words, and in the things that we say, do we think about promoting peace, bringing peace into difficult situations? When we do that, the proverb says, and we shall have joy. Not only will we have joy, but we will have the joy of seeing peace brought into perhaps a difficult situation. And so we see that in the Bible here, in the Proverbs about words, that words are powerful indeed. Words wisely used have the power to heal, to cheer, to bring joy, to promote peace. But how do we do this? How do words work like this? I won't keep repeating loads and loads of proverbs on the slide. If you go on to one of the house groups during the week, I'll make sure you have a list of some of these proverbs that you can think and talk about in your groups. But there are a number of proverbs which give us clues as to how we should apply that wisdom in particular circumstances, what are the qualities in our lives that we need if we are to speak wisely, if we allow the God's gift of wisdom to work through us. For example, if we slip quickly, if we slip quickly to chapter 15 and into verse 8 there, it says, a patient man calms a quarrel. Perhaps I should say a patient person calms a quarrel. And, patience is a very important virtue to have as we consider the wise use of words. Another one of the Proverbs that Cheryl read there, verse 16, fools show their annoyance at once, but the prudent overlook an insult. Difficult words, difficult situations to find ourselves in. Insults unwisely spoken by people can cause real hurt. And in my experience, at least, when I was at work, I found the most difficult situations were when people started to accuse you of doing things because they will benefit you and not the group or the team. It's difficult to overlook those sorts of insults, and very quickly we find that we respond perhaps unkindly to do in those particular situations. But we need to be humble in the way that we reply, so the proverb says. And we need to think before we speak. Another one of my mother's sayings used to be, well, you count up to 10 before you reply. And that's perhaps very good advice. We need to avoid that quick reply, which is often not very well thought out. Verse 13 in the chapter tells us, a gossip betrays confidence, but a trustworthy man keeps a secret. We need to be trustworthy in the things that we say, in the things that we repeat. If we gossip, if we betray confidences that people have in us, then that will not be a wise way of speaking, not this wisdom that comes from God. And we need to speak the truth. Truthful lips, it said in the chapter, truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only for a moment. And in various places throughout the book, there's an emphasis on the fact that God detests, I think it says in places, the liar, but respects and honors, and it is someone who speaks the truth. So words have tremendous power to bring joy, to bring peace, to bring happiness, to bring healing where there are difficult situations. To have words of wisdom that we can, to have the wisdom that we can use to do that, we need to have the qualities in our lives of patience, to be humble, to think before we speak, to avoid gossiping, to speak the truth into these situations. And as I prepared during the week for this sermon and turned into the New Testament to some of the references to words there, one particular subject seemed to occur over and over again, and that was the use of the word to encourage. And in a number of places in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, we are told to use words to encourage one another. Paul, writing to the church in Thessalonica, says, "He died for us, whether we are awake or asleep, that we may live together with him. Therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just in fact you are doing." Which is a real compliment to the church at Thessalonica. We seem to be doing very, very little else that was right. But they were encouraging each other and building each other up. The writer to the Hebrews says in his book letter, "See to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you have a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from God, but encourage one another daily, as long as it's called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness." Are we encouraging each other? Are we using words to encourage each other in our faith, in our understanding of God's word? Are we encouraging each other so that when we face difficult days, we know that we've got friends who are able to help us in those particular situations? As a church, do we encourage each other? Do we give thanks to people who've done things well? Do we, glad to hear Polly speak this morning, thanking those who came yesterday to help with the barbecue and treasure hunt. It's good that we thank people and encourage them in the things that they are doing. And there's the power of words to delight God. Proverbs 12:22 says, "The Lord detests lying words, but he delights in people who are trustworthy." God can delight in our words. God delights to hear us when we praise and when we worship him. God delights to hear us when we sing his praises, when we glorify him. What the Lord doesn't want to hear are lying lips from us or from anyone. As we think about lying lips, again, my thoughts went to the New Testament, to the letter there that James wrote, and the famous chapter 3 of James, which starts by telling us something about the tongue. James says in his letter, "With the tongue we praise all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It's a restless evil full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise the Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth comes praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be." We have one mouth and one tongue. in which we say words, sometimes words which may be discouraging and which are hurtful to people and are not liked by God. But James says, going on from that, those verses, the next few verses, he says, well, how can we change this? What's got to happen if our words are going to delight God, if he's to hear our praise and our worship, and that's going to delight him? He says, but the wisdom that comes from above is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. If we want our words to please God, if we want him to hear our praise and our worship and be pleased by that, then those words should come from lives which are pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, good fruit, with good fruits, impartial and sincere. And where have you heard of those words before? Where have you heard of those qualities before? We've heard of them, of course, in the fruits of the Spirit. During COVID lockdown, I think we had a series of sermons on the fruits of the Spirit, the things that should blossom in our lives if we are close to God, if we're allowing God to come into our lives and to fill us, and to, if we're trying to follow his ways and get close to him. And the whole thing seems to me to fit together as a neat package, a neat circle, that we want to get close to God. We want to, as we do that, these qualities of the fruits of the Spirit develop in our lives. And these are just the qualities that we need. If our words are to be wise, if wisdom is to come from our lips, and if our praise and our worship is to be to the praise and the glory of God. So words are a powerful weapon. They're a power for good when used wisely. They're words that can bring peace and joy. They can heal. They can bring happiness. They come when we are patient. We speak patiently. We're humble. We speak the truth. We avoid gossip. They come when we are drawn close to God and we allow the Spirit to fill our lives and draw close to him. I usually try to close my sermons with a song or a verse from the days of my youth. So that's going back quite a long way. And as I prepared this, a song came to my mind. I won't ask anyone to sing it, though I expect that if you've been in Sunday school since you were very small, or if you've taught juniors, preschool people in church, you may well know the words which say, "Be careful, little lips, what you say. Be careful, little lips, what you say. For there's a Father up above who is looking down in love. So be careful, little lips, what you say." Amen.